and welcome. Yeah, I'm not much on social media. I post I post my talks and post the audio later, and I just kind of get overwhelmed and depressed when I spend too much time on social media. And I found I'm a lot happier uh, without it. But I did run across a post from an old ashram friend years ago, last week, and he said the following: "Please stop posting your Wordle score online. I don't care." I have read about Wordle, um, which is it's a game. I read the New York Times, so I saw that they bought the game. It's a five-letter word. You try, you put down a five-letter word, and it'll highlight if there's a correct placement of a letter. It's green. If the letter is in the word, but it's not the right placement, it's yellow, and then it's gray if the letter's not in the word. And so you have 5 tries. I'm not a puzzle guy. I never really got into crossword puzzles, and for math puzzles, I remember even as a kid thinking, there are people who enjoy figuring this out. I'll let them handle this. But 2 of my friends started sharing their scores on Instant Messenger and started goading me into doing the same. So I started, and I hate Wordle. And the reason why, because, anything we resist has a cause, and basic Buddhist psychology here, and the cause has to do with attachment. And the attachment is the attachment to the results. I don't like being beaten. I have one friend, he's just really, really good at this stuff. And I just sit there and I get stuck. I just there's no way there's a word that starts with V and has a U and a D at the end. That word does not exist. And I would sometimes just sort of walk away from trying to figure out this thing. And I've noticed that sometimes when I'm not even thinking about the problem I'm trying to solve, that suddenly the word will come to mind. So why am I telling you this? Well, 2 reasons. First is, don't start Wordle unless you really like it. But also, it's about the nature of the mind. How does intuition work? That I'm trying to solve this 5-letter word, this stupid 5-letter word. I can't figure it out. I walk away. And then later, boop, it comes up. It just pops up in my consciousness. There it is. Maybe you've had an experience like that where you're looking for something, you can't find it, and then later kind of you're on your way to work, and then you go, oh, of course, it's in the bathroom. I'm fascinated with this process of how things come into consciousness. How do we know anything? How does this mechanism work? And how can we develop that and cultivate that capacity to see more clearly, more consistently? And how does training the mind through meditation play into all this? So I'd like to talk, with the time I have with you, about 3 things. One is it's really about the conditions that cultivate clear seeing. One of them is sincerity. One is the sense of what are called the 7 factors of awakening, which is a really interesting thing to review, and really exploring how do we really embrace this practice. So these are all elements of what I think of as the art of listening within. There are different models, many, many different models, of course, for listening inward. And what I find is the power of questions can be incredibly, incredibly powerful, and the power of mindfulness. So, I have been blessed in this life to meet a lot of people on a spiritual path. Some people I've met have a really deep practice, a very sophisticated understanding of the Dharma, and yet they're stuck. And others I run across have very little background in practice, very little understanding of Buddhist philosophy, psychology, the Dharma, and they have these huge strides in their practice, like massive insights and big revelations. As I've offered the Year of Mindfully program for 10 years, people fill out an application, and there'll be some people who've I've done all these retreats, I've done all this practice, and then there are other people I haven't really practiced, but I'm really, really interested, and I've really come to realize that I can't really judge anyone by their practice. There's one element that I think makes all the difference in practice and in cultivating deepening insights into the nature of reality. And if I could sum it up in one word, it's sincerity. Having a deeply sincere heart. The Latin root of sincerity is sincerus, which refers to a pure and genuine quality that's free from any pretense and free from any falsehood. And really, it comes down to what we think of as what's been called a beginner's mind. As Shunryo Suzuki wrote, in the expert's mind, there are very few possibilities. In the beginner's mind, infinite possibilities. So how do we cultivate that sincere, kind of open quality of heart when it comes not only to practice, but when it comes to life? Seeing things as if we were seeing them for the first time. So how do we tap into sincerity? And particularly when it's time for meditation, and you probably know this little trick, that when you notice the mind saying, I have to meditate, try substituting the words, I get to meditate. It's a big shift. Wow, I get to meditate. I get to take 20 minutes to close my eyes. The question that I ask myself when I need a refresher, and I need one a lot, as I've said before, I'm not a natural contemplative. When I sit down to meditate, sometimes, not all the time, not often enough, I'll ask myself, why am I practicing? And you might ask yourself right now, why are you here? Why are you listening to this talk on becoming more awake? Why is that important? This is the power of questions that can take us into the heart. Why is this important? When a challenge comes up, what can I learn about this? If someone is struggling or you're in conflict, to ask yourself, how can I help? When Tara and I got married, we took the occasion for our vows to do a version of the Bodhisattva vow, which is a very powerful vow for orienting yourself in life. And the vow how we articulated it was, may whatever arise serve the awakening of heart and mind and be of benefit to all. Now, I love my wife, and sometimes we hit the skids. We have some conflict, and I do my normal thing, which is to kind of withdraw and sulk. And when I remember that vow, how can this serve the awakening of heart and mind? Sometimes I remember it. It's a game changer. Even when I know I'm right and she's wrong, it's a really helpful inquiry. How can this serve the awakening of heart and mind and be of benefit to all? So as we explore this topic of listening within and the power of inquiry, I'd like to ask you just a little question right now, little Zen Pop Quiz. Won't take long. Now, I'll give you some time to reflect, and if you like, you could write this down, or you could, if you're at your computer with your keyboard, or just sort of notice what arises. So if you like, you can close your eyes. You might take 3 slow breaths, and as you exhale, Just notice what could soften, what could relax. And if you would, take a moment to reflect on this sense of who you are as the witness, the observer in your life. Notice what's changing. What's falling away in your life? Is there a sense of what's calling you? And if you would, take a moment to kind of sense this quality of the sincere heart. And let yourself just notice what arises from the following question. And if you like, you can just notice internally, or if you like, you can jot something down. What is the most important thing in your life right now? What is the most important thing in your life right now? And again, you might just take 2 slow breaths, part of your transition. And if you like, you can open your eyes. Now, you may have noted that something arose over time. It may have been a feeling, it may have been some thoughts, it may have been some images. But also, even if you didn't get a clear inner response to that question, you may have just noticed that there was a pause, that pause was sort of opening. So powerful. And I can't underscore enough when it comes to inner listening, the power, the potency of cultivating a sincere heart. It's hard to practice this when the mind is distracted. You know, there are these 3 intuition-killing mind states of greed and hatred and confusion. When the mind is lost in wanting and craving, when the mind is lost in aversion, judgment, anger, blame, and when the mind is just simply confused and not present. But this question, what is most important right now, can be a very powerful way to bring yourself into that space of the heart. It's one I use a lot. I try to use a lot, and I certainly do it before every talk. I have in my outline that I follow when I write a talk, at the very, very top is, why is this important? And so, why is this topic of inquiry and inner listening important? I believe that this is key to seeing clearly and getting free from unnecessary suffering. You know, I believe that these practices open up the membrane between the linear rational mind and the intuitive mind, or the Buddhi mind. And I believe while this is challenging, while it requires patience and persistence, there can be incredible joy in coming in contact with like a truer sense of our nature, of a purpose that's aligned with the heart and aligned with reality. So just by articulating why this is important, I'm getting pumped. So think of this as a tool that you might use. When you have a phone call to make, why is this important? It's juicy. And so the question is, like, how do we really develop this sense of inquiry? Now, in meditation, we have like these 2 different qualities of meditation. One is calming. Shamatha practices are calming, arriving, steadying the mind. And that's being aware of the in-breath as you're breathing in, being aware of the out-breath as you're breathing out. And if you do this long enough, you start to calm, you start to arrive, you start to gather attention. And then there's this practice of vipassana, which opens up a deeper quality of investigation, of cultivating insights into the nature of your experience. So just to briefly touch on this, I was once in a conversation with a woman who had really kind of reached the end point in her job. She took a job at a nonprofit and came in with a lot of idealism, was, supporting a really good cause that she believed in. She was making kind of a decent living. After a while, things changed. She got a new boss who was a little more of a petty dictator. She wasn't feeling connected to her team. The mission was a little bit fuzzy. And she was stuck. There was something in her that really wanted to sort of stay and hang in there, but part of her was really just done. And she noticed that in that stuckness, she was starting to self-medicate. That she was listless, that she was kind of detaching from life. Now, we all have this experience at different times, a sense of dissatisfaction, a sense of unease, and traditionally we try to ignore it, or we try to nuke it in some way. But what we can do is we can actually at times turn toward it. And as she described it, she said, I feel horrible, but it's familiar. And I'm not sure I want to look at this because I'm really scared of what would happen if I change jobs. So in her mind, there was a lot going on. And in her felt sense of her body, there was a lot going on as well. There are times in our lives when we're called to turn and investigate what's arising. So a Zen Pop Quiz again for you, if you would. If you can close your eyes. And if you would, just take a moment just to kind of sense inside. Just sense the throat, the heart, the belly. What are you feeling right now? If you could just sort of describe to yourself in a word or two. Is there an emotional word that resonates with the feeling right now? And you might check in. Does that emotional word, if you have one, does it resonate with the feeling? Is that the right word? Sometimes it is, sometimes it's close, but it's not quite it. And you may find that the felt sense of your body can be a really wonderful way to validate or verify what your mind might label. So if you like, you might deepen your breath. And then when you're ready, you can open your eyes. And during that little practice for myself, I just sort of checked in. I thought, God, is there an emotional word right now? And the word came up was buzzed, because I'm feeling a little bit elevated. And I kind of went back to, is that the right word? And it wasn't quite the right word, but what was the more accurate word was excited. I'm excited about this stuff. When we draw on mindfulness, we're drawing on two fundamental wings. It's the two wings of the bird. One is wisdom, the capacity to see clearly. And one is what you can think of as loving presence. That heart space that holds what's here. When we can name what's here accurately, that's seeing clearly. This practice of RAIN, R-A-I-N, to recognize what's happening and to name it. Very, very powerful. Then we can ask ourselves through the A, can I allow it? Can I make room for this? This is the loving presence quality. Can you name it? Can you allow it? And you can drill even deeper, and that is, you can look closer, the eye of investigation. Okay, so what exactly is this? The N of rain is, again, can I hold this in loving presence? And this is the art of investigation. It's really, really powerful, and it's really nuanced. And while there's a lot around inner listening, it just seems so important to me to kind of reflect on what are the optimal conditions when you're investigating something in your life. So, back to this woman who said, I got this thing going on. I'm not sure I really want to look at it. And so she kind of described it. Okay, here's my job. I'm sick of it, but I'm self-medicating. I'm listless. I'm bored. I'm not happy, but I'm not sure I want to look at it. The whole ball of dukkha, the whole ball of suffering. So as she described it, I asked her, I said, well, does it feel okay to be with it now? And then she said, I'm exhausted. I don't think I have the firepower to be with it. And that was such a significant moment because it wasn't the right time for her. One of the elements of these 7 factors of awakening is you have to have energy, because to investigate stuff that's challenging, it requires some firepower. And so what we did is we just simply explored if she could just sort of recognize what's happening, to kind of let it know, okay, here's the issue, I see it. Now's not the right time. But sometime down the road, when I have more energy, when all the conditions are here, my intention is to investigate this more fully. And that was a very skillful practice, I think. And I think it's an incredibly skillful thing that when you are exploring your relationship to reality and it's not agreeing with the way you want it to be, to really ask yourself, is now the time? And sometimes it just isn't. So I'd like to talk about these faculties of awakening. And I'm going to go relatively quickly. But what I would like to do is to kind of sort of guide you through a reflection first, and then I'll talk a little bit about them. So again, we're back to Zen Pop Quiz land. If you like, you can close your eyes. And as I offer these questions, they're just sort of notice what arises, and you may find that it can be a bit of a mirror of your inner state. So you might like to, with your eyes closed, just deepen your breath. And we're not even going to explore any particular issue. It's about just being present right now. 7 questions. Is it possible for me right now to observe without judging? Am I willing to be with the intimate experience right now? If any challenges or resistance arises, can I stay with the practice? Can I find pleasure here in the adventure of discovery? Is it possible to relax and calm my mind and body even more right now? And how much more intimately present can I be right now? And can I accept and embrace reality as it is right now? As you're ready, you can deepen your breath, open your eyes if you like, or remain with them closed. There's something here I find just tremendously helpful for myself. That when you want to be awake, particularly when you're exploring or investigating something, when you're doing a deeper inquiry, that each of these faculties is critical. If one of them is missing, chances are the optimal conditions aren't there. The first is mindfulness. Can you observe without judging? Can you be the witness to your experience and cultivate this sense of non-preferential awareness? Sometimes I think of mindfulness as this kind of unblinking eye. It's simply observing without preference. Challenging, but when we can cultivate that, when we're in that space of mindfulness, it opens a doorway of moving out of your preferences and seeing what's real. The second quality, the second faculty is investigation. It's the willingness to turn toward what's here. And if there's difficulty, am I willing to turn toward what's challenging here? Can I be with the resistance that arises? This leads into the third, which is around energy. You need energy, and you need determination and effort. So the question here is, can I stay with the challenges that arise? Can I call on grit? When you experience one of the 5 obstacles of the mind, when you're aware of a craving, wanting mind, when you're aware of the mind that goes off into fantasy and that kind of self-soothing mental states, when the mind goes off into anger, judgment, ill will, hatred, when the mind goes into hypervigilance and worry, when the mind goes into sloth and torpor and heaviness and sleepiness, when the mind goes into doubt and self-judgment, can you stay with it? Another quality is referred to as joy. And this is a really interesting one. And this is, can you find pleasure in discovering what's here? When you can, and you may know that feeling when you're sort of like, you get this insight and you realize, oh, this is what it is. There's that sense of a little bit of an upwelling of recognition. And kind of a balance to that sense of joy is calming, tranquility and relaxation. Can I relax even more? How still can I be in the midst of what's presenting here? How much can I open to the unformed, unfelt arising of information, of sensation, of thoughts and beliefs? That sense of deep, deep calm is critical to practice. And paradoxically, can you cultivate that deep sense of calm and at the same time be one-pointed? Can you intimately stay present to the here and now? Can you name what's here? How one-pointed can you be with the feeling inside as it arises and changes? And the seventh quality is equanimity. A certain kind of steadiness, your capacity to accept reality. So all of these 7 qualities are really interesting because they seem almost paradoxical. And yet when you can be mindful, when you are willing to investigate the reality of what's here, when you can cultivate a sense of determination, find a sense of joy and pleasure in what you're discovering, when you can deeply relax and concentrate and allow what's here and make room for it, these are the qualities that cultivate the most optimal state for insight. Sometimes it's really challenging. It's really, really, really hard. Some people have a natural facility for this. And so I'm always aware when it comes to inquiry, when it comes to kind of the altered states that kind of rise in meditation, it's a very, very slippery slope here, but it's fascinating. It's just fascinating to me. Many, many years, oh my God, 30, 35 years ago, I was with a good friend of mine out in New Mexico. And another person back from my ashram days told me about this amazing psychic who lived back in the mountains outside of Santa Fe. And so my friend and I, somehow we got in touch with her and we drove out to see her. And we actually had to take down a wire fence and drive through and put it back up to get back to her cabin. It was so remote. And we took notes for each other. And my friend Michael had 4 kids then. And without any background on either of us, she just sat down and talked through each of his kids in order with some amazing spot-on information. Talked to him about his work, mentioning that his work was going to change because his boss was sick and the whole structure of the organization was going to change. And afterward, all that proved to be true. In the past, I've had a real fascination with psychic abilities, with intuition, that capacity to see around the corner. I did lots of intensive practices and lots of experiences in altered states. I've had some wild experiences around the practice of inquiry, of listening within, of exploring these different altered states. And I want to share a cautionary word, because it's been very, very helpful, for me, these practices. So I learned transcendental meditation when I was 15. And there was something about the practice that just from the moment I experienced it through my initiation into transcendental meditation, I knew internally, I'll be doing this practice for the rest of my life. I just knew it. It was one of those. And I was really disciplined through it, all through school, all through college. And then I got very involved in the TM movement. So I did a lot of their advanced courses. There's a course called The Science of Creative Intelligence. And I was in a community where we all meditated, all through college. And I was deeply into it. And they have a course, a month-long course. Actually, I don't know the length of it now, but back then, I'm talking decades ago, a course called the Siddhi program. And the Siddhis are these capabilities that arise with advanced consciousness. According to the Siddhis, according to kind of Vedic lore, that when you move into a very, very deep state, into like the samyama state, and it's really this blend of like deeply, deeply relaxed. All those 7 factors of awakening, you're deeply relaxed. You're one-pointed. You're investigating. There's non-judging awareness. There's equanimity. You've got the energy. That you introduce these particular techniques, and the concept is that when the mind is utterly still and yet one-pointed like that, and you introduce a vision or one of these particular techniques, it's like you're blasting the brain, and then with it, specific parts of the brain, and these different capabilities arise, and they're quite fantastical. And I'm really enamored with this stuff, and my goal was to take this program. So when I was in the Peace Corps, you get a resettlement allowance of $3,000, and the course was $3,000. And I was on my way to Maharishi International University in Fairfield, Iowa, to do this course. And they had it's a wild thing. If you want to, just you can do your research on this if you're interested. But they have these domes where the men and the women practice separately, and you do these different techniques. And again, they're quite fantastical. On my way there, long story, but after my stint in the Peace Corps, I tried to be the first guy to cross the Sahara Desert on a bike from the south, inspired by Kevin Hickey, who I met, who did it from the north. And it was a disaster. The hot season came early. The Harmattan winds were terrible. I got really sick. I went back to Paris to hang out to try to get better. I didn't. I came back, blah, blah, blah. So I went to this ashram to talk to a homeopathic doctor. I had no idea what a homeopathic doctor was. I thought it was similar to a psychopathic doctor, but he was a wonderful guy. And then suddenly here's this ashram of people meditating and practicing. And I met with the teacher, I met with the guru, and I told him where I was going. And he said to me, you can meditate in a cave, remove yourself from distractions, and you can learn how to walk on water. But as soon as you walk down the street and someone insults you and you react, those particular techniques are of no value whatsoever. He said it seems important that we purify our desires first. Because if your desires aren't pure, any particular capacity of mind you develop is simply going to get you into deeper trouble, because you'll be pursuing things that aren't really aligned with your purpose. And so if you focus on purifying your desires, over time, all those elements will arrive organically. And that really made sense to me. And so I abandoned my plans and I moved into the ashram, and I stayed for 24 years. And again, it kind of comes back to this sense of sincerity. What is most important to you? There is no question in my mind that as you give yourself to these practices, these transformational practices, that everything between you and feeling free, feeling happy will present as you investigate it, as you make peace with it. You will become more alive. You will become more free. You'll become more happy. You will have more energy. And you will absolutely be able to create more easily. And the question is, what do you want to create? So there are all these stories, all throughout all kinds of traditions of people who meditate and they develop all these incredible capacities, and then they get distracted. They get caught in wanting, or the sense of self-importance begins to overwhelm them. And as someone who has practiced to some depth, and I have had some fantastical experiences, I have found it so important to keep coming back to cultivating that sincere quality of heart. What is most important? What do I most want in this life? Now, I'm very excited to share more about the mechanics of inner listening, about the power of cultivating the questions that open you into creative possibilities, about the power of using your body as this amazing tool for intuitive inquiry. It's unbelievable. And at the same time, it seems so important to become very, very grounded in the practices of liberation. Just one example Just have a few minutes here. I have found myself very caught up in the events of the world. Very, very anxious and fearful about how precarious our democracy is right now. Very, very frightened, for the future generations around what's happening in the planet right now. And it's very easy to kind of fixate on that and really get myself wound up. But this very interesting question, and I'll just pose this here in our final minutes. If you like, you can close your eyes. And you might just reflect on what's happening in the world right now, externally. Reflect on what's happening internally in your life, if there's any strife, any concerns, any tensions. And what happens as you kind of honor what's happening now and you expand to a 3,000-year timeline? What do you notice? What do you feel? If you like, you can deepen your breath. If you like, you can open your eyes. There's something very interesting about that for me. Realizing that civilizations come and go in 3,000 years. That over the years, horrific things have happened. That perhaps there's an evolution of consciousness that are happening. It doesn't take away the importance and significance of action, but it does widen the frame quite a bit. And so part of the question is, given this 3,000-year view, what's the most important thing for you right now? We can apply questions in ways that can bring us down. When we ask ourselves, how am I safe? What's going to hurt me now? And we see the media do this all the time, asking these questions that invoke fear. We can also ask questions, how do I serve? What's the most important thing right now? When you're at the grocery store and you're trying to pick what kind of apples, you can stop and ask yourself, what feels right? How many? Let your body give you some feedback. These are some of the very, very subtle ways that we can use questions to open up new possibilities. And so when you are actively investigating your life, remembering these 7 factors of awakening can be really, really helpful. And remembering why is this important can be a way of cultivating a heart that is sincere and that can open a doorway to new possibilities. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I love this stuff, and we'll be exploring more about the mechanics of inner listening, in particular, the potency of questions and the power of somatic investigation, which is just really cool. Again, thank you so much. Many, many blessings. Thank you for your time and attention.